And we're now joined by Dr. Philip Mann from Harrisburg University to discuss the in-air mid-collision. Dr. Mann, you're also a lifelong aviation expert, and we appreciate you taking time to join us this afternoon.
Glad to be here.
Yeah, so we want to start with the airspace above Reagan to really understand what happened. This area is one of the most secured but also busiest airspaces in the country. On top of that, you also have a restricted space above the White House and Capitol. Can you explain to us how that could affect traffic flow for planes and also the communication?
Oh yeah, so a lot of the Reagan International Airport has, like I said, super complicated airspace. It's got not just the airport, it has all the surrounding smaller airports, all the military operations that happen in that area, plus the flight restrictions because of security, and that basically causes aircraft to have to fly into certain corridors that become very, very, very congested. And this enhances the need for air traffic and the aviation community to be much more rigorous and much more regimented with their communication to make sure that they're saying and doing the things that they need to do to follow the procedures. And that's a thing to keep in mind, is that, commercial airspace and any of this kind of airspace, it's very regimented, it's very commercial, it's very safety oriented. So it focuses on that. Make sure you're doing what you're supposed to be doing when you're supposed to be doing it. To that end, it also becomes kind of unforgiving if there are any mistakes or overreaches or anything like that.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about that later, but we heard from the NTSB about their investigation. Talk a little bit about what they should be looking for, also in terms of altitude and how low or high the Black Hawk should even be flying.
Last point first. I mean, how the Black Hawk is going to be flying is going to be what is suitable for the operations, whether they were training or actually flying. So that's going to be quite variable. There are procedures they have to follow, and that's going to dictate a lot of that. But as far as the NTSB, the short version is that they're going to look for everything. They will examine the wreckage, they'll examine the flight history, they'll look at the radar data, they'll look at the communication records, logs, the flight recorders, all that, all with an eye of how do we keep this from ever happening again. Additionally, when the final report comes out, I guess they're going to have the preliminary report should be out, I guess, in the next 30 days or so. And that's just their first pass on it. That's based on what we see at the time, this is what we have. But going forward, they may go as far as coming out with recommendations for additional technology, additional training, additional flight rules, the sort of things that would alter and improve the way aviators interact in the airspace and the way air traffic controllers interact with those aviators to keep everybody safe and to keep this kind of incident from happening again.
And I think a lot of people are just trying to understand. I want to know what you think, why there was military training so close to a major airport, also in such a vulnerable area that intersects in some of the biggest intersections for government, businesses, and tourists. Why was this even happening in the first place?
The thing is, there are military aircraft flying in the airspace all the time. These were very likely very experienced pilots. They were very used to flying things, very used to flying in this sort of airspace. And helicopters don't venture that far from home generally anyway. So they were probably based somewhere in the area, and they were just doing whatever it is they were doing, patrolling, training, whatever. There are, questions about timing. Now, nighttime airports are generally less busy than daytime airports. Military aviators have specific training they have to do at night sometimes, so that can be a factor that could contribute quite a bit. But everybody, I think, probably went into this very eyes wide open. This is probably a very routine sort of operation that they went into it knowing they were going to be flying in conjunction with commercial space. The air traffic and everybody knew they were there. It'll just be up to the NTSB to figure out where was the break in this otherwise very safe, very controlled chain of operations.
So there's been near misses, runway incursions for years, and a higher demand for air travel. So what do airports and airport control systems need for pilots to safely do their job? Is it less flights, or is it what you talked about, just better communication, or all things combined?
I think it's going to be all those kind of things combined, because runway incursions and things have been the number one priority, or one of the very number one priorities for the FAA for a long, long time. And I think what we're going to start seeing is possibly the uses of more advanced technologies such as augmented and mixed reality. So maybe the pilots have a display that points out where that other aircraft is that they're supposed to locate. I think we're going to probably see updates in training, more awareness training, stuff like that. But all that'll wash out in the NTSB report and see what it is they come up with.
Yeah, so that kind of follows the question of what do you think should be the priority now for Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy in his new role?
Well, as I think that a big thing is they need to continue the mission of the FAA, and that's the safe and efficient use of the national airspace system. Um, they need to keep pushing forward on safety and not compromise and try to cost cut around safety, because safety is everything. And as unfortunate as it is that we see an incident like this happening just recently, happening just last night, commercial flight, commercial aviation, these big airports are the safest way to travel anywhere. You're safer flying in an airplane than you are crossing the street or driving your car anywhere. So we just need to keep notching that up and become more and more safe and more aware of the places where the safety can break down.
All right, Dr. Philip Mann, thank you so much for your insight and for your time. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.